Hello, my name is Dan Riley. I'm with the National Weather Service Forecast Office, the Houston Galveston office, located in League City. I'd like to speak to you for a moment about hurricane hazards and being prepared during the hurricane season. The National Weather Service has 122 weather forecasts offices across the nation. And as I say, I work at the Houston Galveston office. We cover 23 counties in southeast Texas. You can see a picture inside our operations area during Hurricane Harvey with the forecasters briefing each other. The core of our mission is to issue forecasts and warnings for the protection of life and property. So we try to give you the weather information you need to make the appropriate decisions to protect yourself and your family. Every storm is different. For those that have been in hurricane country for a while, you know that. Hurricane Ike was quite a bit different than Hurricane Harvey, which was different than Alicia, and every storm is different. Of course, Tropical Storm Allison had a huge impact on the Houston area. Typically, you've got some combination of these four hazards: damaging winds, storm surge flooding, flooding rains, and tornadoes. For Harvey, the biggest impacts by far were the flooding rains in the Houston area, not so much wind, not so much storm surge. For Hurricane Ike, storm surge flooding was the biggest effect, along with power outages from high winds. And then you can add a fifth impact, and that would be the high surf and rip currents at the beaches. So what of these hazards is the most dangerous? It's going to be the water-related hazards. These cause about 90% of the fatalities. So I'm talking about flooding from heavy rain and from storm surge. You can see wind accounts for just 8% of the fatalities. So many people think of hurricanes and the very high winds, and they can be dangerous and deadly. But it really is the water-related hazards that are the most dangerous. And the bar chart on the right-hand side tells us that a fairly large percentage of storms that have fatalities have rainfall-related storms. And this can occur well inland. In a relatively small fraction have surge-related fatalities, but when they do occur, they can come in bunches. So let's look at storm surge flooding examples from the local area. You can see the high water on Galveston Island and the heavy surf as well in all these pictures. These are all from Hurricane Ike. One thing I want you to know is the water comes up well before the high winds arrive. The storm surge flooding occurs well ahead of the winds. So if you are in a storm surge prone area and you're in a coastal area and there is some significant surge coming, you're going to want to evacuate well ahead of the arrival of the winds, typically a day or two ahead at least. Hurricane Harvey, as I said, for us was mostly a rainstorm with catastrophic flooding. But down the coast, near where it made landfall, it was a significant wind event with storm surge as well. Look at those wind gusts measured there in the Rockport area, up to about 150 miles per hour. So you can see the kind of damage that these type of high winds can do. Now, it's been a long time since Houston has had a direct hit from a high category storm. Harvey was a category 4. If this storm were to have come in and moved up I-45, no doubt we would have had significant wind damage across the city of Houston. So how can we be prepared for the hurricane season? What can we do now? The first thing is to determine your risk of your home, your business. What risk are you to storm surge flooding? Are you in a surge zone? What about high winds? How strong a wind can the structure you live in withstand? For example, a mobile home can withstand much lower winds than a really sturdy built home to code, or perhaps even better, one that's built above code. Tornadoes, often you can't plan on tornadoes. They tend to be very localized, and the damage is more isolated. Inland flooding. Are you in a flood zone? Are you in a flood risk zone for heavy rain due to a bayou or just flash flooding? And then rip currents can be dangerous at the coast as well. So this is one map to assess storm surge risk. This is sort of a worst case flooding from a direct hit from a Category 4 hurricane. And all the areas you see shaded there have a certain depth of water above ground. The red indicating greater than 10 feet of water above ground. So this is a pretty frightening image. It's really showing us how bad the surge can be from a direct hit at any point on the map, and then you can plot all those values. And you can see many of the areas around Galveston Bay and even 10 to 20 miles inland of the coast have this 10-foot or greater of seawater above ground. Now we saw not flooding to this extent with Ike, but significant flooding more closer to the coast. But if you are outside that color shaded area, then storm surge flooding is not so much a risk for you. Here's a close-up look at Harrison County and Houston, and you can see the parts of Southeast Harris, including LaPorte, parts of Baytown and Pasadena that would be underwater from a worst case Category 4 landfall scenario. And then some of that high water extends up the ship channel, areas like Channel View, Galena Park, Pasadena. So there are parts of the area that are vulnerable to storm surge flooding. But if you're not in these areas, then storm surge is not such a risk for you. The whole area, though, is at risk to rainfall flooding like we saw with Harvey. So even though we might not have storm surge in some of these areas, anyone can flood in greater Houston area. Another thing you can do is develop an evacuation plan. If you are in an evacuation zone, and I'll show you the map for that in a moment, have a go bag for supplies. Have something to take with you. For those that lived through Hurricane Rita, remember that evacuation was 24 hours in an automobile for some people to go a fairly short distance. So it was very important to have gas in the tank, to have a supply kit with water, non-perishable food items, medicine if necessary. Plan several routes out of town, and I'll show you the evacuation routes in a moment. Plan to take your pets with you if you can. You certainly don't want to leave them behind if there's any way you can take them with you. And then follow evacuation orders if given. Your elected officials are getting briefed by us at the National Weather Service, and we're giving them the information they need to make the best possible decision. So really take those evacuation orders seriously. Here's a look at the evacuation routes on the left-hand side for the region. You can take any route out of town, and the idea is to get inland away from the coast. But the routes you see there in red are designated by the state of Texas as evacuation routes. And along those routes, resources will be provided like extra fuel and other things. So if you do take a small side road, you won't have that support. There's no support from the authorities on those routes, but you can take smaller roads if you like. And then on the right hand side, you see the different colors there. These are your evacuation zones, which are organized by zip code. And the idea here is those zones shown in purple would be the first to evacuate. They're the most at risk from storm surge. Those in yellow would then be ordered to evacuate next, or at least suggested. And then if the storm is pretty severe, perhaps that set of green zones would be evacuated next. And then for those zip codes shown in orange, That would be for the worst of the worst type of storm, perhaps a Category 4 like we showed, where there may be a significant wind threat as well. The areas in in white on the map normally would not have an evacuation ordered. You're sort of outside the traditional evacuation zones. So I mentioned earlier to have a go kit if you're evacuating. It's best to have a supply kit as well if you're staying. You still need that food and water, non-perishable food items, plenty of water for everyone in your family. Plan to be without water for perhaps 5 days. Keep that gas tank, I'd say, greater than half full. As you know, after a storm, there may be very little gas available, so it's good to have that full tank of gas you can work with. Have cash on hand. It's quite possible your credit cards won't work if we don't have power, for example. And then keep a radio, batteries, phone chargers, so you can keep that supply of information flowing to you. And we rely on our cell phones so much now, but remember, the cell towers may be down, you may be without electricity, so it's good to have paper copies of things like critical contacts, doctors, phone numbers, insurance agents, etc. And then have an adequate supply of medication. Sometimes doctors ahead of a storm will prescribe a little extra supply to hold you over while recovery occurs. Get an insurance checkup. One thing you might not know is your homeowner's insurance will likely not cover you in the event of flooding from heavy rain. And that's surprising to many people, but there is a supplemental flood insurance policy you can get through the federal government through floodsmart.gov, and your insurance agent will be aware of that and they can help you get that set up. But in general, have all your policies reviewed. Make sure your coverage is adequate ahead of the hurricane season. There are some insurance policies like flood insurance that require a 30-day waiting period, so you can't wait till there's a storm in the Gulf to get this done. You want to get that done now. Strengthen your home. There's a lot you can do around your home to sort of fortify it, protect it from hurricane winds. Have a way to cover your windows if a storm approaches, whether that be plywood or storm shutters or something else. Secure any loose outdoor items like lawn furniture or anything else ahead of the storm that could become projectiles in the high winds. Trim those trees. You're likely to lose at least large limbs, perhaps uproot some trees as well if you do catch those high winds in the storm. Move your vehicle ahead to a safe location. Perhaps you're taking it with you for evacuation, but if you are staying, get that into a garage if you can to avoid some damage to your vehicle, and secure all doors. Help your neighbor. This is good to keep in mind as well. Think about people in your neighborhood, your friends, your neighbors, your family who may need help preparing for the storm or perhaps evacuating, and then check in with them after the storm passes. Make sure they're okay. They have everything they need. It's really important for us to help each other, and so keep that in mind. And put a lot of this down in writing. Your evacuation plan, your supply kit, what goes in there. And then have a contact list: family, friends, doctor, vet, utilities, insurance. Have that, and have a paper copy of that. As I mentioned, we may not have access to cell phone and the internet and all that. So go ahead and print out a copy of your most critical contacts. Keep important documents together for quick access. It's not a bad idea to put that in a waterproof Ziploc bag or perhaps a tote, just to protect it from getting wet in certain situations. And then have at least one contact, maybe a family member outside the impacted area that you can check in with. That way all the family members can keep track of each other and know that they're safe. And then share your plan with others, so particularly your family, so they know what you will do in the event of the hurricane. Last thing to cover, that's a little bit about preparedness. A big part of this too is staying informed during the hurricane season. Keep track of what's going on in the tropics. And I've listed some useful websites there: hurricanes.gov, weather.gov/Houston, and then your local emergency management pages and social media. Basically those from your jurisdiction. So City of Houston and Harris County have excellent homeland preparedness and emergency management pages, as do really all the cities, counties, and towns around the area. One thing I would suggest looking at on hurricanes.gov is this graphical tropical weather outlook. There's a 2-day and a 5-day version. And the 2-day basically tells you, first of all, what storms are out there. And you could see in this example from last September, we had Tropical Storm Sally, Hurricane Teddy, and Tropical Storm Vicky. And then notice the 3 other features plotted there with X's. Those are disturbances which have the potential to develop into tropical depressions or tropical storms or hurricanes, in this case over the next 2 days, since this is the 2-day outlook. And you see the percentages listed there. That's the chance that it will develop based on the Hurricane Center's thinking. And then there's a 5-day version, which looks out, as the product title implies, it looks out 5 days. So where might we see a tropical cyclone develop in the next 5 days? So for us on the Texas coast, you might immediately look at that area down there in the southwest Gulf with a high chance of developing over the next 5 days. And that's important for us because we can get storms form right over the Gulf and come in with a few days. So you can't always wait till the storm actually forms to take action. And then you can see another disturbance at point X coming off the coast of Africa and due perhaps to develop in this hatched area over the next 5 days. High chance. Getting to the hurricane season forecast now. First thing I want to say is the normal numbers for hurricane season have gone up. Just this year, we've updated the number of named storms, typically 12 on average, now 14. The number of hurricanes, on average 6, has gone up to 7. And the number of major hurricanes, meaning category 3 or higher, remains at 3. Well, how does this happen? Every 10 years, we update the 30-year averages. And so what's happening now is we're including 2010 to 2020 seasons in the new averages, and that's why they've gone up a tad. What is the forecast for this year? We're looking at most likely an above normal season, perhaps 30% chance of near normal, and so the named storms forecast is in the 13 to 20 range, where the new normal is 14. The number of hurricanes forecast to be 6 to 10. The normal is 8, so that's bracketed right around normal values. And major hurricanes forecast 3 to 5. The average is 3. So looking at most likely an above average season. We need to be prepared every year. Even if this forecast said below average, we would still need to prepare the same way because it only takes one to cause a problem for us. Finally, some links here to stay informed, websites. You can see our Twitter feed there, our Facebook page. We also post weather briefings to YouTube. If we do have a tropical system, we will present that to your elected officials and emergency managers, and we will record that briefing for everyone to listen to and get the latest information on. And then I encourage you to look for your local emergency management websites and social media. Search for under your jurisdiction, and you can find it there. We also have a hurricane severe weather preparedness guide linked there. The 2021 version will be available soon, but lots of good information in the 2020 version as well. Thank you very much, and have a safe hurricane season.